All right, now buckle up. Get ready. We're actually getting started here.
All right.
It was a little bit like a false thing at first. It's like when you board the plane and they make you wait like 50 minutes before it takes off.
Those false starts happen, but it's just another bump in the road.
I feel like you probably exist well in the Bardo state, though, in that in-between state. You know what I'm saying?
All those years on World Cup, they trained me well for that.
So today we have Michelle Roark, super excited. We met on happenstance at a listing, and it taught me that the universe doesn't have any accidents. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast, Grindset.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
This is going to be something else. And, oh my gosh, you have such an extensive background. So generally where I start is I love to hear the journey that people have taken that gets them to jump off the scary cliff and becoming an entrepreneur. And you've been jumping off cliffs your whole life, so it had to be pretty easy for you. But let's start. I mean, I know you've got this awesome background. Let's start at the beginning, which is like, how did you become a professional skier? Like, what the heck kind of crazy
what
is
was
going
I
on
thinking?
there? And then how did that develop into your business now? Because I see a direct harmony between that and what you're doing now, honestly.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Since I was 5, I wanted to do 2 things. I wanted to compete in the Olympics, and I wanted to be a chemical engineer.
Really?
Most people are like,
Since you were 5.
Since you were 5, you wanted to be a chemical engineer? How does that happen?
I wanted to be a train conductor.
Hey, that's important. I think what we want to do when we're 5 or as earliest as we can remember is super important, because it's the vibration we came in with before all sorts of other people put into our minds what we're capable of, or what we should be doing or what we shouldn't be doing. So what that child says when they're 5, train conductor, there's something there, I think, that people should tune in and tap into and encourage. And for me, wanting to be a chemical engineer, there's a funny little story around that, which I could tell you if you want.
Yeah, we want to hear. That's what we're here for today. We want all.
This could be a long interview.
We want all the stories. Yeah,
Okay.
That's the whole point of this podcast.
So I was 5, and I was in this little town in Coville, Utah, and my dad took me to a natural gas plant that was in the process of being made. So it was encased in this big bubble, and there were all these lights and big machinery, and I was walking around in the mud, and I saw this blonde lady with a hard hat on telling all the men what to do. And I was like, Daddy, what does she do? And he's like, she's a chemical engineer, honey.
Yeah.
I was like, that's what I'm going to be. And it just stuck. And being a chemical engineer and an Olympic athlete led me to what I do now perfectly. Like you said, the universe doesn't have accidents, right? If you just keep being guided by your heart and your passion, it always brings you into alignment with what you're here to do.
Mm-hmm. I love professional athletes, hiring professional athletes, especially because there's that level of discipline that I feel is a really hard thing to achieve. And I can only imagine the level of discipline to pursue both of your goals simultaneously. 2 goals that are very lofty, that if anyone just accomplished one of those, they probably would consider their life a success. How much would you say that being a professional athlete followed you into the world of being an entrepreneur and influenced the way that you behave today, your rhythm, your discipline, etc.?
Well, I think athletics, sports of any kind, are so important for kids growing up because it teaches you so much. The most important thing it teaches you is how to fail, right? I can't tell you how many times I fell down and had to learn to get back up, to the point that was no big deal. It was part of the process. Fall down, learn from that mistake. What did I do wrong? Were my hands down? Were my eyes down? Let's get up. Let's do it again. Let's hike that air. Let's hike that air. Let's do it again. And that was just so ingrained in me from a young age. Because before I started competing in freestyle mogul skiing, I was a very extensive and competitive figure skater. And through that, you really learn to stand on your own and compete on your own, but interact not so much with, that's a very individual sport. When I went to freestyle, it was you competed on your own, but you also interacted with a team, and they were like your family. So I highly encourage sports like that, especially something like freestyle, because the camaraderie that exists, but yet you're still standing on your own and competing on your own. So you're learning both aspects of it.
There's so many parallels to that and being an entrepreneur. So much to unpack there, but where I want to start is not only did you fall down, but you got back up. And a lot of people, that's enough. Like, they're like, well, I got back up. But then they don't look at, well, why did I fall down? What could I do a little bit better? And you turn that failure into a success. And that's what I'm hearing with the training. So when did you start? First, it was figure skating, and then you went into skiing. When did this journey start?
My business?
No, the figure skating and then the skiing.
So, like I said, I wanted to be, excuse me, I wanted to be in the Olympics since I was 5, and I always wanted to be an Olympic figure skater.
Yeah.
And so I would practice on my roller skates every day, and I'd beg my dad to take me ice skating. And when he finally did, I was doing camels and spins and jumps, and then they finally got me into figure skating lessons when we moved to Colorado. And I was 7, and I would get up every morning at 4:30 and train before school. I'd train after school every day of the week. But if we wanted to see our father, on the weekends, we had to ski. My dad was a ski fanatic. So every weekend he was skiing. And to my ice skating pro's dismay, he would take us skiing every weekend. So I was sort of learning both, and highly competitive in skating, ranked nationally. But then when I was 15, my parents got a divorce, and I actually got kicked out of the house, and there was no money to support skating anymore. And
they kicked you out, huh?
Literally, they did. Yes, I know. I'm such a bad
kid.
Too.
I was kicked out, kid. Yeah,
that's funny. I'm not sure. Mine was more of a case of having parents who were just so unhappy and abusive that they didn't make great choices, in my opinion. I mean, I was a straight A student, and I was a really competitive figure skater. But anyways, it was a great experience because I ended up going to the mountains and living in a tent in Winter Park. I camped on national forest land, which I know now was illegal, but at least back then it was safe. And where my building is now in Denver, it's in the heart of homeless land where people are just camping right on my doorstep. And if I had done something like that, I would have never survived. It was really going up back into nature and being nurtured by nature, and then getting right into competing and skiing, because I figured if one door slams, I'm going to find a freaking window and climb through. So I found a window, I climbed through. I started competing in skiing when I was 16, and I won nearly every competition I entered. I won junior nationals, and I made the U.S. ski team.
Wow. How did I got to go back to the you living in the wilderness for a little bit, because that gets my, like monk impressions. They're going crazy right now.
There's so much to unpack here.
They're going crazy right now. How did that feel at first? Like, how did you make that decision? I'm kicked out. Now I'm going to go into the wilderness. I think it's so opposite of how a lot of people would think. Like, now I'm going to go stay to friends or like, do drugs, do alcohol, do what I was doing at that age. And that's why I got kicked out.
Oh, now the real story comes out.
Yeah. I was smoking weed. That was real taboo in rural America. Yeah. That was the bad stuff, But why did your mind go there, do you think? That I just want to get some solitary. I want to go to nature. Right. Nature, did you think like it was going to be healing, or was that just a side effect?
Yeah, this is such a good question, and I should dive into that deep on my own. Because I'm not sure I have a really clear answer to that. I've always been very guided by something so much bigger than myself, and I'm so grateful for that connection. I would say that spirituality that I always had from a young age. And I just have always followed that guidance. And I think that has led me to what I do today, which I'm far more proud of than any of my skiing accomplishments, because I know it's right in alignment with where I'm supposed to be. But the way that initially you had asked me, how did I come to that? And the way that I came to that was listening to that inner guidance or guidance of something bigger than myself. And just to clarify, I was kicked out at 15, and I was taken to my dad's house, and there was an argument over who didn't want me more. So I stayed as long as I needed to get a car and get my driver's license. Yep. I couldn't have survived up there without that. And so it wasn't until I was 16 that I moved up there and enrolled myself in high school up in Winter Park. And
wow.
I worked 3 jobs at the movie theater, at the T-shirt shop, and at Carver's Bakery. And the great thing about that is one, I could wait tables there because there was no alcohol, right?
Yeah.
But they would also feed me. And in the summer months, it was wonderful because I would just be able to eat there. And then I would go back to my tent and I would take the leftover pastries from Carver's Bakery to the security guard at the ski area. And it was my like bribe for him to let me into the gym so I could work out after hours and take showers. And I just made it work. It was actually such a beautiful experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
That's what I wondered. Do you feel like you achieved a level of stillness or realization by doing that then followed you and allowed you to get closer to that internal voice? Like, do you feel that happened out there for you?
Yes. And I like I said, I wouldn't change it for the world. I am so grateful for that experience and that time alone in the woods, because it really molded me into who I am, and I'm so proud of that person. And I often think I have children now, and I'm like, how can I make sure they get such a profound experience without having to kick my children
Send
out?
them to the woods.
Yeah,
it's
at an early
easy.
age.
All right, you're 16. It's like the Native American.
Go live on your own, dude.
Native American rite of passage, right? You go out to the wilderness,
Right.
you discover yourself, and in that you become an adult. So you have this transformation really from child to adult that happens in the presence of nature.
You are so right. You are so right. I mean, the ancient traditions were so in touch with these things.
Yeah.
And we so got divided from ourselves through how we structure, a child's life these days, like right into school, right into reading these books, learn this, do this, don't really think for yourself. We separate people from nature, and it separates us from our own selves, our own higher beings,
Yeah, and the irony to me, not to go on a soapbox here,
Right.
is we have focused so hard on individualism, which has locked people in the shackles of their minds. So I feel like what nature does is it forces you inherently outside of your mind. It forces you, especially if you stay in the elements. If you stay in the elements, you can't ignore nature. If you're out there for an hour or two hike, you can probably be in your head the whole time. But if you're living out there, you can't ignore when it starts snowing. You can't ignore when it's cold when you wake up. You are living in nature, and it's those very symbols, not to get Wordsworthian with it, that bring us into ourself.
You're so right. Yes, there's so much healing power in nature that we overlook so much. And I think, with what I do today is I harness the energy and biological essences to create really powerful energy medicine, or what we like to call quantum nutrition for the wearer. But I'm basically trying to bottle that experience in the woods, where it was really helping me come back to myself and remember or reassemble my whole being as one.
Which is such a powerful way to start a business, is really when you experience something profound through the lens of compassion and empathy, trying to find a way to get other people to experience that. Even with your kids, like what you're saying is like, how can I give them that? And that has been the basis of your whole business, and we're going to get there. Trust me, we are going to get there.
It'll be a long podcast.
I know. We're still in the woods right now. How did you decide, and at what point were you like, I've experienced enough of this? Was it winter? Because winter would have done it for me. I mean, like, it's a lot of snow up here in Winter Park.
Right. Winters were definitely challenging.
Did you stay out there during the winter?
No, I mean,
Okay.
I had friends, and I did couch surfing,
Yep.
and I stayed in my car a lot.
But still very nomadic style of life. Yeah.
I had an old rusted out Jetta, and the seats
nice.
don't don't go down in the back, so you had to just lay. But luckily, I'm not that tall, so I could almost be completely lengthwise in the back seat.
Yeah, people always think they want to be tall. Let me tell you, world's not built for us, okay? It's not built for us. I hit my head 3 times a day at least.
Good things come in small packages.
Okay, that's true. So you're in Winter Park. When is the like professional skiing? When does that really kick off for you? Let's hear about that, and then segue it into your current business.
Well, I was still dead set on my goals I had since I was 5. I wanted to be a chemical engineer, and I wanted to compete in the Olympics. So I knew I was good at skiing. I had that figure skating background, which was edge control and jumps, body awareness.
Yeah.
And like I said, my dad was such a ski fanatic. It didn't matter if his kids wanted to ski or not. We were going to ski. In fact, the only reason I went skiing when I was little was for that chocolate donut he would buy me in the morning.
Chocolate donuts will make me do a lot.
Look,
Yeah,
it turned into
big
a whole
motivator.
career for me. I was just recently at the World Cup in Deer Valley this last weekend, and it made me just realize, oh my goodness, I was on World Cup for 21 years.
That is
I was injured for 5 of those years.
Yeah.
I had 7 knee surgeries while I was on World Cup. So 5 of those I wasn't skiing, but 16 years I was skiing on a professional level in moguls, which for an alpine racer isn't much, but for a mogul skier, that's a lot.
That's what I was wondering. Is that like a typical career length?
It's a way shorter than that for a mogul skier.
That's what I would
Yeah.
think. It seems like that would be really hard on your body, and of course, your knees are a testament to that.
And I think to your point earlier, just learning how to fall down and get back up, I was very tenacious and determined because most people, if they get on World Cup, they usually, a knee surgery is very common and they blow their knee and they're done.
Mm-hmm.
I did that 7 times and still came back. So it was just the obstacles are meant to instruct, not obstruct. For me, those times when I was out with my knee surgeries, it was like I'd be at the World Cup being brought down in the sled on the phone with school back at home because I went to Colorado School of Mines while I was on World Cup, and I'd be registering for spring or summer or fall classes because I knew I was going to have a window of not being able to ski. And I became the girl at Mines that was always on crutches.
So you're like on the phone with them on the sled down? Oh, you're good. Yeah,
Should
no.
I?
Well,
Can I take? Should
yeah,
I
if you
turn
want to
that
take
off?
that, you absolutely,
wanna turn
you
it
absolutely
off.
can. We can edit. We can do all this.
Okay, yeah, you're gonna have to. Sorry about that.
I'm gonna go silent with mine while we're doing a little.
Sign them out. Okay, sorry.
No, mine has been ringing too, and it's been annoying me. So
Okay.
I'm really glad that you did that. So you're on the sled down,
Mm-hmm.
and you're calling Colorado School of Mines. So your mind is like
What's
immediately when something goes wrong. What's next?
And what's the lesson, right?
Uh-huh.
Like I always had this mindset that obstacles are meant to instruct, not obstruct. So, what window is this opening for me to jump through?
Yeah. I think for a lot of people, it's very easy to give up after a failure. What to speak of experiencing that 7 times over and over and over and over again. What was your mindset like to get you through that? Me having experienced a bankruptcy and a failure of some businesses, it took me a little bit to bounce back mentally.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like you thinking like, what's the next step?
Right.
And my actions were there, and then my mind followed my actions. What was the process like for you?
Very similar. I think the mental aspect is the hardest part to come back, and it takes the longest. I was actually just thinking about that when I would recover from a knee surgery. Physically, you could be recovered in 6 months to a year. Mentally, it's like 3 years.
Yeah.
It depends on how severe the fall was or the impact. But I think that's the hardest
What's
part.
the disconnect there? Just out of curiosity. So physically you're healed. Mentally it can take 3 times the amount of time. Is it because you're replaying the trauma and that's why? Or what takes the mind longer to catch up to the physical reality? Because they say mind over matter.
Right.
So you think the mind could move faster, but a lot of times it's what's giving us hold. It's what's causing lag time.
I think that's such a good question because the answer is we overlook how important it is, right? Like when I was injured all those times, they were just looking at how to rebuild the knee and get me back out on the course. How do I rebuild the muscles? How do I make sure that ligament is tight? And then, okay, here you're ready. Nobody ever said, how are you feeling about how that accident actually happened? Do you have any ideas on why that happened in the first place? And from the research that I've done and the work that I do now and the book that I wrote that really goes back and looks at all of this experience that I had on World Cup, and I look at from more of a scientific perspective why the situations were happening, more from an energetic component. So
Yeah.
for me, excuse me, I have something in my throat.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, more water would be great. Thanks, guys.
Sorry.
You're good. This is what we're here for.
Thank you. Should we go back to that question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, why does it take, in your opinion, the mind longer? And you were talking about how, the way that I'm understanding it, physical therapy really just addresses the physical.
Right.
And doesn't address the mental component that exists.
But think about how our society operates. It's all about the physical, right? We overlook the mental and the even more importantly, emotional body, the much bigger energy body. In fact, if you start talking about your energy body, you're kind of classified as a gypsy or esoteric or a pot smoking skier. But we can actually show in science now what mystics and yogis and intuitives have always known.
Yep.
That one, we have a much larger energy body, and two, diseases, ailments, issues, accidents like knee surgeries and falls, they actually are manifesting first in the energy body before it takes form in the physical. And we can actually show this from science right now. So I feel like that's so fascinating, and it's just it's opening the doors for new wellness and new ways of looking at our experiences in the 21st century that are going to advance our health and wellness more than the last 100 years.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting definition of metaphysical to me, what you just said, because I think a lot of people think metaphysical is this hoity-toity new age philosophy that doesn't have much teeth to it, but metaphysical literally just means beyond the physical.
The physical.
So now we're talking mental. Now we're talking emotional as two heavy components of the metaphysical that are just completely blatantly ignored by a lot of people, particularly modern medicine. So I want to segue in. Now you're at Colorado School of Mines, and this is really where the idea for your product that now became your business, Fia Labs, came up, right? What was that experience like? Because you told us the perception of people, and I imagine you're with a bunch of oil and gas people at Colorado School of Mines. Like how do you get this idea to them? How is it received? How do you get past this world of academia to push something that is quite against the grain forward?
Yes, it was definitely outside of the norm for my mines professors, and it took a long time to find any professors that supported my out-of-the-box ideas. When I started at Mines, the head of the department said, you have to choose between skiing or engineering because there's no way you're going to do both.
It's one or the other.
Yes, this is a boot camp for engineering, and there's no way you can do the skiing. And I was like, well, I'm going to do my best to do both, right? And so this automatically set me in a class that was kind of outside the norm for a Mines student. Let alone, I've always been a very girly and colorful dresser. So that really stuck out at Mines. When I had my pink feather pen and not my mechanical pencil and my high heels with pink rhinestones, they're like, what are we going to do with this thing here? And then I ended up staying there for so long because they only offer certain classes, certain semesters. And once I was really rolling on World Cup, I could never get the classes that were offered in the spring. And so my career there was very, very extended, but it was everything in divine purpose, right? Because once I retired, I had been on World Cup. Just going back to World Cup really quick in order to answer that question, I wanted to compete in the Olympics, and I should have competed in the 98 Olympics, the 2002 Olympics, maybe even the 94 Olympics, and I got injured before all of those.
Oh, wow.
And I was ready to give up. But at that time, the universe delivered me some people in my life who really believed in me and encouraged me to go on. And so then I was training for the 2006 Olympics, and at this point, I wanted to make sure I crossed all my T's and dotted all my I's, and I stayed healthy. And I was winning back-to-back World Cups. I was ranked in the top 5 in the world. And so things were in alignment, and I wanted to make sure that this actually happened for the gold in the Olympics. And I remember the sports psychologist saying, make sure you visualize with all 5 of your senses. So hear it, feel it, see it, taste it, smell it. And I could do all of them but smell. I had no idea what it smelled like to ski well. So I thought, I'll find a fragrance, I'll wear it just for skiing, and it'll be my scent of competition. only I was highly dissatisfied with commercial blends. They would give me a headache. They would sometimes burn my nose. I did some research. I found out how toxic they can be. In fact, they say walking into a cosmetic counter at a department store can be more toxic for you in terms of what you smell than an auto mechanic's garage.
Are you serious?
And we're
It's
putting
like
this...
going through that section at Macy's
Yes.
is really bad for
It's
me.
really bad. And we're putting it on our largest organ, which is our skin.
Yeah.
Several times a day.
Yeah.
And I was looking for something to empower me, to be the brightest and best version of myself, to help me invoke the zone, that emotion and that feeling of skiing perfectly. That's why we visualize, right? We're trying to get into the zone. All elite athletes, I mean, I can't say all, but I would say almost all, have like a competition playlist on their iPod. So they're listening to a certain type of music.
Yes.
A lot of them have a certain drink that they drink on competition day. So they have that taste in their mouth. They're visualizing like crazy. So they're using their sense of sight and visualizing that perfect mogul run or that perfect feeling or of any sport or even presentation or any elite person doing something to their highest and best, right? There's a lot of visualization that goes into that. There's a lot of, we'd all wear our lucky socks, which had a certain feel. Like there's no way on comp day I would switch to a wool sweater as opposed to that fleece that I wore every day, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to invoke that emotion and that memory of skiing perfectly and getting into the zone. And some people call that flow state. Yogis will call it flow. There's a lot of different words for it, but it's that space where you can't put a foot wrong and everything just kind of flows and falls into place. And yet all of us were overlooking our most important sense that's directly related to the part of the brain associated with memory and emotion. And it's through your sense of smell that you could truly trigger that feeling and emotion of skiing perfectly. So I set out to make my own concoction to do just that.
Yeah.
And on World Cup, it was having a profound effect on me. It was really helping me drop into the zone. I had so many tangles in my energy body based on my childhood and the roughness that I experienced there, that I was getting injured all the time. I could still, tenacity and heart and sure will, I was still winning World Cups, but it wasn't consistent.
Yeah.
And it was exhausting because I
Yeah.
had to go through so much to get around all those tangles and roadblocks that were in my energy field. And again, I know that sounds metaphysical, but we can actually show how those emotional issues lead to physical ailments or experiences
Yeah.
now in science. So
Well, I think that there is that side where people are skeptical, but then that same person will say stress is the number one cause of disease.
right.
Well, what is that?
Right.
What is stress at that point?
Exactly.
Is that a mental reality? Is that an emotional reality that you're entering into that is then having physical ramifications? So you're developing this product really so that way you can enter into the zone, so you can enter into flow state. It reminds me so much. Have you read Dr. Joe Dispenza at all?
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
Yes.
it reminds me so much of Dr. Joe and entering into the quantum is what he says, and forming a reality so that way you can step back into the physical and walk right into it. How does that product get developed? Like, where do you start that? Like, were you going back when you were in flow state and trying to remember what that experience was like and then reverse engineering that to develop a product? Or like, how do you start that process?
I started off looking at perfumes to just be a scent that I could then associate with that memory and emotion.
Yeah.
And so when I decided commercial fragrances were not the way to go, I decided to apply my background and make my own from kind of like a perfume sort of aspect. So I took courses in Gras and Thailand and New York, and I became a certified perfumer. And I was making concoctions with 100% pure essential oils, nothing synthetic.
That had to be such an interesting classes. Wow.
It was fascinating, and I traveled all over the world. We were in a different country every weekend for 13 weekends in a row for 16 years or more. And so I would always go into the antique perfume or antique bookstores and buy up every perfume book I could find. So really looking at the ancient form of perfumery when it really was a medicine. It was made as a medicine to heal people.
Yeah.
That's the original. And then, of course, then it became masking smell for people who didn't shower, all that kind of stuff. But originally, it was alchemists who provided quote-unquote perfumes as medicine to heal people. And I truly believe And I think Joe Dispenza and even Dr. Bruce Lipton and many others in that area would second that there's a cure for all mankind's ailments already exists in nature. And it has a couple billion years on us for perfecting itself. And we've just gotten so divided from nature that we forget how valuable and important that is. And obviously, we can't patent energy or nature, and so we can't put it into a pill and charge people a lot of money for it. So we've really been divided from that.
And that's why you think the industry hasn't gone in that direction. Why?
I mean, oh my goodness, if you look back like the 1600s, that's when we decided if you were going to study unseen matter, you were a priest or a spiritual leader. If you were going to study physical matter, you could be a scientist, but don't dare do both or we're going to kill you. That was the mindset. And it wasn't until the late 1800s, early 1900s that men, not really women, scientists were feeling more comfortable talking about unseen energy. I mean, what we see in the physical world is 0.03%. So we're basically asking scientists to explain the physical world walking around with blindfolds on.
Yes.
And so once we took those blindfolds off, we discovered all sorts of amazing technology. I mean, we got the internet, satellite communication, radio waves. We got so much beautiful technology, and then we did apply it into medical procedures. We got x-rays, ultrasounds, MRIs. But my question is, when did we apply it to medicine?
Right. We didn't.
Energy medicine is far more effective without the toxic side effects.
And that's, I think it's such an interesting thing because we've gone down, science particularly in the 1600s, which was the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, went down this pathway of gross materialism because it was almost an answer to the Catholic Church at that time that had mistreated people, that had given this bad stigma to the metaphysical, in my opinion. So I think it's natural for humanity to rebel to that, to be like, no, like they're lying, like don't give them a bunch of money to make it into purgatory. Don't do that. There's nothing that supports that. So humanity pulls back, they go in the other direction. But then what we found, and especially in the modern era, is that doesn't work because it doesn't treat the full human. It doesn't treat the mind, it doesn't treat the emotions, it doesn't treat the soul, in my opinion, to be a pot-smoking gypsy. Okay. And I think that that's a huge problem, and almost you're the answer to that problem. And I don't think you're an isolated phenomena that's happening out there right now. I think there are more than one Michelle Roark, albeit you are an individual, you are independent, you're doing something that's unique and special. But I think there's a lot of people on this wavelength right now that we need a more holistic approach because we are whole people. We are not just our senses. We are not just that limited perception that our senses give us. So what an amazing journey to go on that. So you start by really testing fragrances, becoming an expert at that. And I know you did a bunch of science to back it up too. So let's talk about, going from a product that I assume starts working on you, right?
Right. Not just me. So I was on World Cup and it was having a profound effect on me. And I had this pink sparkling neck gaiter with sequins all over it. And it was like fleece with roses.
Yeah.
And I would douse it with my concoction. And even though it was pink and sparkly, I had men from the World Cup that would literally tackle me to take my neck gaiter to use it for their competition run because they were finding it was having a profound effect on them as well. Not everyone, but a certain group of individuals, it was really helping. And so that got me going on making different concoctions for different, basically personality types to see if that would have an effect. And sure enough, it did. I mean, my good friend Jen Heil, I think she's won more World Cups than any woman in the world still today, I believe. I'm not positive that stat still stands, but anyway, she was a big advocate or fan of the Focus blend that I made for her. And so when I retired from skiing after the 2010 Olympics, I'm coming from a very scientific background, and yet I realize what I'm saying sounds so metaphysical. And I'm like, this is obviously aromatherapy, right? Aromatherapy has been a true medicine around for 3,000 years. Why is it so pushed aside traditional medicine today when I'm clearly recognizing what an effect this has had on me? So I dove into aromatherapy. I bought up every single book I could find. I wrote, and as I'm reading, I'm finding out very quickly why, right? A lot of the information contradicts itself. There was a complete lack of real data that backed anything up, and a complete lack of understanding of how and why it really worked. So I thought, well, I am just going to show the world from a scientific perspective how and why aromatherapy is so important. And I'm going to build the data and the research and the science behind it. And that's what I was still working on graduating from Colorado School of Mines. Thank goodness my degree was still dragging out there because I was able to use pretty much my own lab. I had my own gas chromatographer, mass spectrometer, and a lot of really great lab equipment and really brilliant professors that were guiding and advising me through this deep dive into trying to understand this on a more scientific perspective.
What did you find? Like, I'm very curious why, your neck gaiter didn't work on everybody.
Oh, thank you. That's such a good question. So what we ended up doing was building a device that measures the electromagnetic energy of essential oils. To your point before, we are so used to dividing things and analyzing components, right? So all the research that I was finding on aromatherapy, they would just take this beautiful essence. So say rose, for example, has about 1,000 molecules in it. And they would take 8 to 10 key molecules they thought primarily make up the scent of rose and analyze them in a laboratory, right? And try to determine from breaking it into its pieces what molecules were contributing to any medicinal effect. So, for example, we found out about aspirin from Native Americans who ate white willow bark, and that would get into their body and it would work and work until the headache was gone. And then we isolated the components and we found the molecule that was primarily contributing to the dissipation of the headache, and we isolated it, created it in a laboratory and call it aspirin. So it's all about isolation so that we can then synthesize it in a laboratory, patent it, and sell it.
Yeah, I think the patent it is probably one of the biggest things for big pharma.
Right.
Which makes sense why you'd want to break apart a key component because you can't patent the 1,000 molecules at a time.
Right. And I think the most fascinating thing for me that I found in some of that research was myrrh is a very medicinal essential oil. It's mentioned 150 times in the Bible. But yet if you...
like what they gave Jesus?
Yes. And what he used to give people to heal them, right? And yet, if you break apart myrrh, the third most primary molecule within myrrh is what you look for at hazardous waste sites to determine if it's unsafe or not. And if you find that there, it is unsafe. So they say, a lot of people will say, don't put essential oils directly on your skin. But that's because they're looking at just these molecules and not the essential oil as a whole. So you really need to look at it as a whole because as a whole, it's profoundly effective.
So that isolated could be hazardous, but because it's combined with other things that offset that, it can have benefit.
Well, and think about the human body. I mean, I think iron is a very minor component in the human body. In fact, I think it's 0.03% of the makeup of the human body. But without it, we would die. So these minor components are also having such an effective contribution to the effect of the essential oil on a whole. So it's like if you were to break apart the human body, you would disregard iron. Well, we wouldn't live without it. So that's not really fair. You can't really do that. So we were looking at ways of measuring essential oils as a whole and trying to fingerprint something about them as a whole. And we looked at various ways of doing that, measuring the thermal conductivity through it, the resonance frequency, the surface tension, various ways. And what we settled on was measuring the electromagnetic energy. I built a device to do just that, and we were able to test hundreds and hundreds of essential oils and group them into what we found as 6 different energy categories.
How did you come up with those, like those energy categories?
Well, we found that when we would excite the outer orbital electrons of essential oils, they would jump orbital, and then when they relaxed, they would fall back, and when they fell back, they would emit a wavelength in the visible spectrum of light. So we were able to categorize them in the visible spectrum of light into 6 different groupings. So basically what you could distinguish as the different categories. So I would have some that were glowing green and some that were glowing orange. And so we were able to classify them like that. And then we had like 20 essential oils in each energy category. And we're like, so what? What does that really mean? We weren't sure we were gaining anything, except from the fact that the professors I was working with didn't think we would see any difference from essential oil to essential oil because they would contribute that difference to the major chemical constituents. And all essential oils have a very similar major chemical constituents. It's a big benzene ring of carbon, primarily. But we proved that there was a difference and that it was visible and that it was quantifiable. And then we weren't really sure what to do after that. So we started looking at commonalities amongst the groupings. And we looked at their physical properties, major chemical constituents, and social emotional properties. And oddly enough, the only commonality was, again, it was in social emotional properties. So then we named them the properties. So at about 220 kilojoules per mole, it had properties that said it was invoking balance in those essential oils. At about 280, it was like boosts confidence, invokes energy. So we named that category charisma. On the flip side, we had about 200 kilojoules per mole, which was releases fear and opens the mind. So we named it adventure. Now, this drove me crazy. I didn't really like this because I'm basically pulling on 3,000 years of storytelling that tell us rose boosts confidence or magnolia releases fear. It wasn't very scientific, in my opinion, even though 3,000 years of storytelling is a pretty significant data pool.
Pretty significant, and a pretty significant amount of effort on behalf of our ancestors to try to pass knowledge on.
Right, exactly.
Which, I mean, if I have knowledge that I want to pass on to the next generation, like you do with your wilderness, you want to give that in some way, shape, or form to the next people. And I think a lot of people dismiss the era of humanity where we were storytellers, where we exist in myth, to try, and the whole point of myth, in my opinion, is to draw attention to that emotional component, that unseen component, almost by making it superhuman, i.e. metaphysical. And we threw that out. We threw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That's such a good point.
So did you find then, it reminds me so much of like the different energy signatures remind me of chakras and how each one corresponds to a level of energy as well as a color. Did you find that then different people had different energy that corresponded to different things? Were there different signatures that brought them into balance? Like, how does that apply to where someone's at, and where does it bring them?
Yeah, such a good question, and it leads to our next level of research. So after we got to that point, I own a very successful salon and spa in downtown Denver for over 10 years. And I would make everybody come in, do our biofeedback device, and it would read their heart rate, their body temperature, blood pressure, galvanic skin reaction, and all the acupuncture points in their head.
The test subjects.
Yes.
I actually, right after we met for coffee the other day, Jared Larkin was in my office. And Jared's like, oh yeah, I used to go to her salon.
What?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah. So I thought that was really cool. I'm like, what a small little world we live in here.
Yeah, we had a great, out of that beautiful building in downtown Denver. And I was a chemical engineer and on World Cup, and somehow a salon fell in my lap.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was not my area. It wasn't but it was sink or swim. I had to learn how to do it. And so I did it, and we did it very well for many years. And now I know why it fell in my lap, right? It was such a great testing spot and really added to our research because we were able to collect a really wide range of data from so many varying types of people that came in for spa and salon services.
And they willingly did this. They're just like, absolutely, this is awesome.
It was really cool, right?
Yeah.
So it would read baseline energy on them, and we would prescribe which out of our 6 energy waves we thought would resonate best with their own signature frequency.
How were you reading that, what their baseline energy was? What was the process?
Well, that would go back to when I first opened the salon and spa. I was the certified perfumer. I was trying to understand how and why these concoctions were helping myself and other elite athletes. And when you're an elite athlete, you're looking for the littlest thing to make
Yeah.
the littlest thing can make the difference between first place and eighth place. It's
Yes.
a millisecond. So
Yep.
you're really looking at everything. And yet I found this thing that was profoundly helping us, and I wanted to understand that better. So I made this 7-page questionnaire, and I would have clients come in and fill that out. And then we would go sit down in my essence vault, and we would choose from 60 to 80 individual essences and build their fragrance from the top, the bottom to the middle notes. After they decided on their favorite blend, we'd usually make 3 samples for them that they could then try on their body and see how it reacted with their own body chemistry and decide on their favorite formula. Then we would be able to put that concoction on our energy device and record an energy on it. And after doing hundreds and hundreds of those, I was able to compile that data into a spreadsheet and build an algorithm out of it, which backs up our energy fit profile.
How did you come up with the 7 questions? I've taken it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
How did you come up with that? I mean, I get that you use an algorithm, you tested accuracy, but how do you come up with those 7 questions that pinpoint what somebody's energy signature is or their baseline energy?
Right. And that's a great question. I feel like so many apps and profiles like that are a little gimmicky. This is actually backed up with really hardcore data. And we continue to add to it and massage those questions to make sure we're getting the most impactful ones. And what we're really aiming for with that is trying to ask people questions from the perspective of their 5-year-old self or as young as they can remember. That are geared towards their social, emotional, or their personal reality, their personality.
Yeah.
And the reason being is we would love to put people on our device and just tell them instantly what their signature frequency is, like we did with the essential oils.
Yeah.
But we would probably shock somebody to the point they might die. So we're in wellness. So that's not a great idea.
Yeah.
So the next best thing is really looking at what is that emotional body, right? What is that? Well, we're all very electric beings. We have about 50 trillion cells in our body, and each cell is about 1.4 volts of electricity. That's over 70 trillion volts of electricity. We're super electric, and we know through Maxwell's equations in physics that around every electrical current that's traveling is an electromagnetic field. And so all of us humans have this electromagnetic field that vibrates around us. It is our energy in motion. It is literally our emotions. So if we want to get at what that signature frequency is from somebody, we need to get at their personal reality, their personality, their emotions from the perspective of a child that came in before they got tainted with other people's views of what they're capable of.
So that's why I put them in the mindset of them at 5, because in your opinion, that reality starts to get covered by conditioning, or what is it that doesn't allow us to connect to that anymore?
Yeah, all kinds of things, right? Like
Yeah.
even our school systems, things you hear on the radio, dissonance in music, your parents' beliefs, your aunt's beliefs. I mean,
Anything
there's
environmental.
So many
everything.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you're bringing something now into the environment that has the opposite effect of noise. It brings clarity. In essence. So what is the effect then for people who are using this? Like, where does it bring them from where they were?
So what we found, which I think is so exciting and so profound, I set out to prove how and why aromatherapy is so important. And what I ultimately found is it misses the mark. It misses the mark a little bit, and that's why it hasn't got the notoriety and credibility that it deserves. And that is because, remember, in the 1600s, we separated studying unseen matter and physical matter. And it wasn't until the early 1900s, almost 120 years ago, that Einstein gave us the equation E equals mc squared.
Yep.
So energy is matter, and matter is energy. It's just a conversion factor of the speed of light squared. And I find it fascinating that our most brilliant minds that really want to help humanity and help people feel better, our doctors, their science is still rooted in 17th century.
Yeah.
Before we really looked at the fact that energy is matter and matter is energy, no wonder our standard belief system is that energy medicine isn't effective, because we're not looking at the fact that it's everything. Energy is everything.
Yeah.
And so if you really look at matter as energy, it flips everything upside down. And we know for sure now that matter is energy, right?
Yeah.
So let's look at it from that perspective. And so what we did is we realized that if you're looking at everything in terms of energy, you have to look at constructive and destructive interference patterns. And so if you could just go back to high school algebra really quick, and you have like a sine wave and a cosine wave, you add them together, you get a straight line. They interfere in a destructive interference pattern. On the flip side, sine squared amplifies the wave, right? It's a constructive interference pattern. Amplifies the energy.
Yes.
So examples in real life are noise-canceling headphones. They have crystals in them that are destructive to the frequency of sound. You get no sound.
Yeah. I think of that every time I put my AirPods in now.
Yeah.
Since we've talked.
Yeah. All right. Yep. Another example is like laser light. It's super, super powerful. It can cut through this building and the next because it's a whole bunch of light energy frequencies that are added together in a constructive interference pattern. So it makes it very, very powerful. So if you take 20 or so essential oils that all have a very similar energy footprint, they're interacting in a constructive way. We just had a dog issue.
Yeah.
The beautiful dog.
Some constructive energy patterns coming in.
He really
to the
wanted
set.
to know what we were talking about.
Yeah. We still good, Garrett? Okay, cool. That's so funny.
Sorry, I'm forgetting. So if you have about 20 essential oils and they have a similar energy footprint and you add them together, they interact in a constructive way, which super amplifies the energy in that bottle.
Got it. So you figure out what your energy signature is.
Right.
And then you get the product that corresponds with it that acts in a constructive way with your existent energy footprint that you have already.
Right, but a lot of people don't realize that they have their own unique signature frequency. And we do know that now through science. It's more unique than your fingerprint. It's actually your smell.
Yeah.
And it's your vibration. It's a signature of who you really are.
Yep.
And it gets cluttered and tangled and dampened by things that add up in our energy field. But if we can match your own signature frequency in a constructive way to the very powerful energy in our product or in one of our energy waves, for lack of a better word, it blows out those tangles in the energy body that cloud and muck up and tangle that truest vibrant form of yourself from showing up in the world.
Wow. Yeah, I can't wait to try it. So for all the folks out there that want to take the test, that want to try the product, where do they go?
Fialab.com.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's PHIALAB.com.
Yep. And where I want to wrap this up is because I think we've hit some really interesting themes. And one of the most interesting to me is this dichotomy between the physical that 17th century science wants, and to me, 17th century science is profitable. You know what I mean? It's you can isolate, you can patent, you can sell, and it doesn't actually work all the way, which is also good for them because that means that you have to keep going back to either A, something new, or B, keep using that same pharmaceutical that gives you the promised land of that feeling that you want. How do we make this the future of medicine? How do we transform an industry that is ran strictly based off of profits?
This is a great question. I think I always like to say, if aliens landed on this planet today, they might say, what do you do for fun? How do you protect yourselves from your enemies? How do you treat your sick? And we would tell them, well, first we try to cut out the issue. And if that doesn't work, we try to poison every single cell in their body and hope that one good one rebuilds the entire body. And they'd be like, you people are crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts.
I am out of here, right? I am out of here. So I do think that there are more people like you and I and people exploring this now because we have beautiful avenues of the internet to get this knowledge and information out.
Yeah.
Back, even just 10 years ago, you didn't have this avenue to spread this knowledge as readily and fast as we can now. And it's really just getting people to open their minds up to something. It's not exactly new. It's ancient healing practices, but reminding them how incredibly impactful and important that can be. And we are doing so many case studies now, and people are just flooding in with, I threw away my depression medication and I just use my energy bouquet from Lab, or I started doing the Lab treatments and now everybody tells me how radiant my smile is, or I lost 25 pounds, or I got my dream job. These are
Amazing.
all results of clearing out your energy body. And the more that we can bring these case studies to the public and continue to talk about the science behind it, the more it'll open people's minds to choosing their own reality, right? I mean, I think we so give away the most powerful force in the universe, which is the power of human thought, and don't give that away to somebody else. You make your own decision. You interact with the things that feel right for you, and you collectively decide how that's going to affect you in your life.
I think that's really, really powerful. Michelle, thank you so much.
My
this
pleasure.
is the most far out podcast that we've had so far. Thank you for coming on.
Oh,
Appreciate
thank you for having me. Thank you.